Coming to you live from your nation's capital in Washington, D.C., at our studios here right by the Capitol at the Corey Lewandowski Galactic Milky Way International headquarters of all time. It's great to be here. Saw Corey a little bit earlier. Joining us now, Jill Vogel. She'll be on in a few moments. Getting a lot of flack, but I'm defending her because she did the right thing. Can you say stateswoman? Well, that's Jill Vogel, and she's coming up momentarily right here on the John Fredericks Radio Network. Just posted my new odds on the 5th District nomination battle. I find this fascinating, but I got to move on because somebody is probably be like, what's up with all this stuff? I got to go to Jill Vogel. Okay, this segment brought to you by our good friends at America First Policies. I love America First Policies. You know why? Because they're fighting for the president's agenda. And they're saying that, look, we support the president's America First agenda. That's what they do. Now, America faces a deadly enemy, drug addiction. More Americans died from drug overdoses in 2016 than died in the Vietnam War. 3/4 of these drug overdose deaths are caused by opioids. Can you imagine that? Just recently, police seized 120 pounds of fentanyl, enough to kill 26 million people. Defeating this enemy is going to take leadership, commitment, and resources. It means better enforcement. Strong borders to stop illegal drugs coming from China, Mexico, and other countries. It means better treatment so the sick and suffering can get the help they need and treatment providers have the tools they need. And it means ongoing support so all Americans have hope, purpose, and opportunity for a meaningful and drug-free life. Congress is working on legislation to address this national crisis, and they need to hear from you. Call Congress now and tell them we must end the opioid crisis. For more information, go to americafirstpolicies.org. That's americafirstpolicies.org. This message has been paid for and authorized by America First Policies Incorporated. Joining us now, State Senator from the Valley, Jill Vogel. She ran for Lieutenant Governor in 2017 in the middle of the blue wave. She led the ticket, got the most votes, and coming in second, though, to Justin Fairfax, who did beat her. Republican Jill Vogel. State Senator Jill Vogel from the Valley. Great to have you with us.
Good morning. It's great to be with you.
I'm really fired up today. I'm fired up. You know why I'm fired up, Jill?
I'm fired up because guess what? We have a budget. And in case people didn't know, that is, by the way, our whole reason for going to session this year, and that was to pass a budget so that we didn't shut down government in the Commonwealth. So I am elated that we did our job.
Look, you have been under fire in social media for the last probably 72 hours, and it intensified in the last 24 hours because you voted for a budget that was in favor of Medicaid expansion, and you were one of the 4 senators, state senators on the Republican side, to get the budget out of the Senate Finance Committee. It was stuck there so they could go to the floor for a vote. So, look.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that budget for a minute because I think people don't have an impression of what this budget really means. It takes us 2 years to do a budget. We hold hearings all around the Commonwealth. We hear from all the stakeholders. And most importantly, it's up to each individual member to do their work in their own district and to solicit input from all of the stakeholders in their own district and then to go and ask for the things that their own community needs. And so I hung by the Senate budget. I supported a clean Senate budget that didn't have Medicaid expansion in it, and I hung all the way through the Finance Committee votes that we had the day before yesterday and through the Senate floor yesterday. But in the end, here's the thing. You have one budget. Medicaid is only one piece, one small piece of this budget. And so you can look at the floor votes. You can look at my votes, every single recorded vote. I voted for the Medicaid reforms. There's no secret. There's no mystery about where I've been on Medicaid expansion. Historically, I have not supported it. I was very, very concerned about what exposure it would create for us, what hole it might create for us in our budget. Here's the issue. States are in a terrible position right now. Congress did not repeal and replace. We have to pass a budget. And the people in my district sent me there to get a budget. And so we had a budget in front of us, and I had the opportunity to pull out the pieces that I had concerns about. to ask for the reforms that I wanted, and more importantly, to put things in this budget that were really important to people in my district. And at the end of the day, all people are focused on is Medicaid. And I know that I have Senate colleagues who are Republicans who, in the end, were happy to have pulled out the things that they didn't like, vote against them, and who desperately wanted to vote for this budget. But they were afraid to take the beating that I'm taking. And I'm not afraid to take a beating and to stand up and say these things in this budget were Republican initiatives that we should be proud to pass and that we should be able to take credit for, like an increase for sheriffs and more money for teachers and, more investment in public safety and transportation and things for my own district that I fought for that I got put back in there. And you have no integrity if you go through the finance process and to leadership and to folks on the finance committee and ask for things and put pieces of, big components of resources into the budget and then stand up at the end and say, you know what, I don't want to vote for it because I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble. I just could not do that. I would not have any integrity if I did that in the end.
Here's the bottom line. You voted for a budget that expanded Medicaid. I'm in favor of expanding it the way it was negotiated by Kirk Cox with conservative reforms. This is not welfare. In order to get this is designed for working, poor Virginians. Many of them have 2 or 3 jobs, making $8, $9, $10 an hour, trying to feed their family. Their companies punching a clock are not like they work at the 7-Eleven or whatever. They don't get health insurance. They can't buy it. They can't qualify for Obamacare expansion. They work. They're trying to move up the economic ladder. And so when they get sick, they have to take their children to the emergency room and themselves. They don't get the proper care. As they move up the ladder, this is a helping hand to provide them with an opportunity to get from point A to point B. That's what Republicans believe in, moving up the economic ladder, bettering yourself. This is not welfare. This is not people that don't work. This is not, a disincentive and all the Tea Party nonsense I've heard. It's all false. These people work. If you don't work, you don't qualify. So the whole thing is ridiculous. I think you did the right thing. But, in fact, I'm positive you did. But here's the thing that I want to point out. This budget passed the Senate 23-17. It could have passed without your vote 2-18. It was going to pass whether you voted for it or not, Senator Vogel.
That's absolutely right.
You had no incentive. You had absolutely no incentive to vote for this except on what your beliefs are. It's cost you political capital. You're getting hammered on social media. You're going to get a primary challenge. They're saying you're done running for statewide office. So you threw all that to the wind and said, you know what? I believe this is the right thing to do for my constituents and my state. I represent the state Senate, so I'm going to go ahead and vote for a great budget with great conservative reforms in Medicaid expansion because I believe it's the right thing to do. And so that's called a stateswoman.
Well, and I will say this. I'm an honorable person. And I also happen to be a member of the Finance Committee. And I also happen to be a person who was heavily involved in this process. And like anything, you don't have to agree with every single piece in the budget. But when you ask for pieces of revenue and you ask for things for your district, a judgeship and agriculture money and school money and all kinds of programs, and then you say, I want all that, but hey, because I'm afraid I'll get in trouble and, I'll get a primary challenge, hey, I'm voting against all of it. How can you possibly do that? And I just am an honest person, and I have integrity, and there was no way I could do that. And yes, as you rightly pointed out, it didn't need my vote. But how can you do that to your colleagues? That's my view.
Well, that's called integrity. Look,
well, it is called integrity, and you know what? No one will ever work with you again if you do that, if you play it that way. And I promise you that I have lots of colleagues who, in the end, wanted very much to be able to vote for all the good things that are in this budget. And in previous budget years, we were often admonished to stand up on the Senate floor, pull out the things that you don't like, go up on the board, but vote for the budget. I want to be for something. I want to be for solutions. I don't want to be for shutting down government. What possible good is in shutting down government? We have localities that are waiting to make budget decisions based on what we and our budget do. Everything turns on how we fund all the programs around the Commonwealth of Virginia. And again, the glare of Medicaid expansion sucked all the oxygen out of the room. But again, that's just one small component on the health care piece. Think about every other component of government that we find in this budget process. And again, I regret that Republicans can't stand up and proudly take the credit for so many of the good things that we've done in this budget.
We're with Senator Jill Vogel, Republican state senator in Virginia. She represents the Shenandoah Valley, and she voted for the 2018 budget, which included conservative reforms to Medicaid expansion that was negotiated primarily by conservative Speaker of the House, Kirk Cox, with the governor. I'm going to get the governor on tomorrow. I was thinking about this, Senator Vogel, and both of us fought Medicaid expansion 2013, 14, 15, 16. You and I fought it. We were aligned then. Now I'm in favor of it. You came our way. We appreciate it. But biggest issues in what changed my mind to vote for it were two things. One was we couldn't repeal and replace Obamacare. And so that is now the law of the land. That's not going away. So you have to deal with it. And you have to change with the changing reality. Obamacare is not going to be repealed. It's not going to be replaced in the short term, or I don't think any time. So you have to deal with it. Medicaid expansion is a big piece of that. But the second thing is when you look at the fact that the conservatives under Kirk Cox negotiated great reforms within the bill of Medicaid expansion that the governor said he would sign off on. I mean, the alternative to this was that if the Senate lost a couple of seats in 2019, you were going to get Bernie Sanders care. I mean, I don't think people understood this, right?
I think that is true. I think, and that was a big rationale for if you're going to crack open Medicaid ever, then for heaven's sakes, crack it open while you have Republican leadership there to put forward real reforms. And you can be sure that I went with a long litany of requests to leadership that was negotiating this process and asked for all kinds of things, capitation, change in eligibility. I didn't get everything that I asked for, but I can tell you that if I want somebody sitting at the table, I want our people at the table. And I think that was an important rationale for why the House decided to move forward now rather than wait. There's no doubt about that. That was absolutely the big driver for why the House moved forward. No question. No question.
Senator, would you also say that the difference in tone and demeanor of the two governors made a difference? I mean, I go back to Terry McAuliffe, who was governor, who I was a supporter of McAuliffe's, as you know, as I thought he was a pretty good governor in a lot of ways. But I really thought he made it very difficult for Republicans to back Medicaid expansion in the bombastic way that he approached it. Remember the 2013 where he did the, banging his fist and demanding it. So, you got people, he made it a very partisan issue, and the divide was too great to ever bridge the gap. This governor, Ralph Northam, on the other hand, played this, I thought, very well, very quietly, didn't gloat, didn't get on the media airwaves, didn't get the ire of a lot of Republicans, just kind of sat in his office, did the budget, talked to people on the phone, and without a lot of fanfare, got these conservative reforms in there and got it done. Don't you think that the way that this governor, Ralph Northam, handled it is part of the reason it was able to pass?
I think there's no question that McAuliffe, who always had a slightly more hysterical approach and who was more threatening and, whose use of hyperbole always definitely put a damper on his ability to engage with the legislature. Also, he had not come from the legislature. Ralph came from the legislature. He came from the Senate. Everybody has worked with him in the past. So I think you combine, his approach also with the dramatic shift in the climate. And again, I think one of the major drivers between where we have been in the past and where we are now is that I think when the House leadership first kind of launched into this expansion discussion, I think many of those folks believe that, that the difference between where we were when I was campaigning all over the Commonwealth of Virginia, I can assure you, and saying, look, Congress is going to repeal and replace the White House is going to be actively engaged in a process of repeal and replace. It's utterly irresponsible to do anything until we know what that's going to look like. Well, they didn't repeal and replace. And so I think this has put enormous pressure on states, and I feel very confident that that was a big driver, again, of why the House leadership moved forward. And certainly it was a big piece of that was that they could work with Northam. I feel very confident. I mean, you stated it perfectly, that his demeanor is very, very different. His approach is very different. And you're right, he was not someone who was prone to make threats or to gloat. And I think that led to a very different process.
The other thing he didn't do is he didn't goad, right? He didn't gloat, he didn't goad.
And also there was nobody who made threats to me. Nobody put pressure on me. That's a very different process than often that we've had before. No one was out there jumping up and down and saying, if you're against Medicaid expansion, that just wasn't the process. And I feel, from my standpoint, I have not really changed my position on how concerned I am about where we are from the budget standpoint. I always have said, and I still stand by my position, that our clean Senate budget was a very, very good budget, and I'm proud of that budget, and I will help produce that budget. So, I don't mean to, by any means, change my position. And all the way up through my votes yesterday, I pulled out Medicaid expansion, voted to change those pieces of this budget, and so I don't mean to leave people with the misimpression that I'm a flip-flopper, because I am not. I am still very, very concerned about the long-term fiscal impact of some of the changes that we have made. But that being said, I didn't feel like that the governor was bullying me. I didn't feel like that anybody was in my face screaming and yelling. I was able to vote my conscience, and then in the end vote my conscience on the whole budget. And again, as I said in the beginning, I regret that there were not more Republicans who felt like they could vote for the whole budget because they were fearful of the wrath that might come for voting for something that, had this in it. Because I go back to, this is a good budget for Virginia in many other ways. And I hope that people understand that at the end of the day, under the Constitution, we really only have 3 constitutional obligations, one being judges, and the biggest of all is delivering a budget. And to have gone through the entire legislative process and almost get to June and not have agreed and have, create the impression that the Senate was the body that was stonewalling, when that isn't fair. It was really, really important to me to be able to go home and say to the people in my district, you sent me to Richmond to do something and to be a part of a process, and to throw out my hands and say I won't participate is not what they sent me there to do. And so I did participate, and especially in the last 2 weeks of this process, when I felt like that, perhaps not enough people were participating. And to the extent that I had the ability to go and ask for things to be put back in the budget that were, going to be left out because we were moving forward with a House budget, I was absolutely there, and there for my district. And so for anybody who's critical of me for voting for this budget, they need to understand that I was there for my district, and that is why I was sent to Richmond. And I'm willing to take the lumps, and you know what? That's what you do. If you're going to be, big enough to run for office and ask for people's support, you got to be big enough to take the lumps, and you got to be big enough to do the work when you get there. And to have come home and had so many of those initiatives that I fought for be kicked out of this budget, all because I was, too weak to vote for it, didn't seem like a very sort of fair thing to do, or a very big thing to do.
I've got 20 seconds for the answer to one question. Critics are saying this is the end of any hopes for Jill Vogel getting a statewide nomination again. True or false?
You know what? I'm not even thinking about a statewide nomination. I'm thinking about doing what's in the best interest of my district. And you know what? Maybe I think too myopically, and maybe I think process too much. But in the end, I have constituents that matter to me. This is about constituent service, and this is about the small things that people ask for in this budget. And if you're always thinking about the next thing, then you should quit. I am not thinking about the next thing. I am so happy being in the state Senate. And if you're sitting around thinking about your next statewide ambition, you really are hurting. I've got to tell you, that was a tough process, and I would not relish to undertake that in any time in the near future. How's that?
That's an answer. No question about it.
I got all I can say grace over right now. I am working really hard. I've got a family that is wonderful, but takes, all of my time. And my state Senate job, look, it's June. I've been doing this every day practically since January. Plus, I have a full-time job. So, no, I am not thinking about running for statewide office right now.
Senator Joe Vogel, I thought you made a very courageous, fearless vote, and you got a lot of guts. And I'm proud to have supported you for various races. And you're a very unique and special woman. John
you
Fredericks
are wonderful,
Radio
and I really
Network.
appreciate the time to be on. And I voted the way I did because I love the people in my district, and I needed to deliver for them. And I appreciate so much the chance to be on.